I think it's time that I read you to bed again. I found this book. It's Battle Royale. I really like the movie, and I found this book. I didn't even know there was a book about it. And I think the cover art is super pretty. It's kind of glossy, and it makes a really nice sound when you tap on it. I don't know if you've seen the movie or if you like it at all, but I'm just gonna start at the beginning. I don't think it's too intense at the beginning anyway, so we'll just see where it goes. Just close your eyes and relax and try to sleep, okay? As the bus entered the prefectural capital city of Takamatsu, the scenery slowly shifted from pastoral to urban. With the city came lights in multicolored neon, headlamps from oncoming traffic, and offices left to shine through the night. A group of men and women in sharp business suits stood talking in front of a roadside restaurant, perhaps waiting for a taxi. Weary, cigarette-smoking youths squatted in the sterile parking lot at the convenience store. A blue-collar worker, perched on his bicycle, waited for the crosswalk signal to change. The evening was still a bit chilly for May, and the man's disheveled, threadbare windbreaker made him stand out. Just one of many fleeting impressions flowing beyond the bus windows, swept away by the low rumble of its engine. The digital clock above the driver's seat changed to 8:57. Shuya Nanahara, boys number 15, 9th grade, Class B, Shiroiwa Junior High, Shiroiwa Town, Kagawa Prefecture, was seated on the left-hand side of the bus, gazing off into the nighttime scenery. He had to lean forward a bit to see around Yoshitoki Kuninobu, boys number 7, who occupied the window seat, rustling through his travel bag. With his right leg stretched out into the aisle, Shuya flexed his toes against the inside of his cat sneaker. The canvas tore inside the heel, frayed threads sticking out like cat whiskers. Those shoes were hard to come by these days, although supposedly that hadn't always been the case. The brand was American, and the sneakers were made in Colombia. Though this was 1997, and the Republic of Greater East Asia certainly wasn't lacking for goods. If anything, it overflowed with them. Imported commodities were extremely difficult to acquire. Well, such was only to be expected with the national policy of quasi-seclusion, especially so with a hostile country like America. Government officials called it the American Empire, as did school textbooks. From his seat near the back of the bus, Shuya surveyed the cabin. Under the dim fluorescent filtering through the clingy ceiling panels, he had a view of the other 41 students who had been his classmates since the 8th grade. After leaving their school in Shiroiwa less than an hour before, the kids were all still excited and chatting away. They weren't overjoyed that their school trip was beginning with an overnight ride imposed on them, either out of cheapness or possibly due to an overly packed schedule. But once the bus passed over the Great Seto Bridge, got onto the Sanyo Expressway, and was on its way to their destination in Koushun, they would calm down a little. Toward the front, a rowdy cluster of girls bubbled around the teacher in charge of their class, Mr. Hayashida. Among them was Yukie Utsumi, girls number 2, class leader and representative for the girls' side, with braided hair that looked good on her. Also in the group were Haruka Tanizawa, girls number 12, her teammate on the volleyball team, and quite tall for a girl. Izumi Kanai, girls number 5, daughter of a town councilman with a prim attitude to match. Satomi Noda, girls number 17, a gifted student whose round-framed glasses suited her calm and collected countenance. Chisato Matsui, girls number 19, ever meek and demure, and a few others. They formed the popular group, or anyway, the middle-of-the-road group. though to call them a group at all might not be quite right. Girls tend to form cliques, but not so in the Shiroiwa Junior High ninth grade Class B, where there weren't really any to speak of. The closest to a clique would be the group led by Mitsuko Soma, girls number 11, who was a little rough around the edges and, to be frank, a juvenile delinquent. Hirono Shimizu, girls number 10, and Yoshimi Yahagi, girls 21, made 3. From his position, Shuya couldn't tell where the girls were sitting. The first row behind the driver's seat was slightly elevated, and its shorter backrest revealed 2 heads side by side, belonging to Kazuhiko Yamamoto, boys 21, and Sakura Ogawa, girls number 4, the closest couple in class. Every so often their heads shook, likely in shared laughter at some joke. Well, with a pair as reserved as Kazuhiko and Sakura, the most trivial talk might seem hilarious. Shuya glanced up at the aisle to see an immense school uniform protruding into the space just ahead. Inside that uniform was Yoshio Akamatsu, boys number 1. Yoshio was the largest kid in class, but he was sensitive, the type that ends up teased and picked on. He was scrunching his bulky frame forward, buried in the latest popular portable video game. The jocks, Tatsumichi Oki, boys number 3, handball team. Kazushi Nida, boys number 16, soccer team. And Tadakatsu Hatagami, boys number 18, baseball team, sat together, flanking the aisle. Shuya himself had been in Little League, and was even called the ace shortstop, and used to be good friends with Tadakatsu until the two had drifted apart, possibly because Shuya had quit playing baseball, replacing the sport with more unpatriotic hobbies, like the electric guitar, was likely part of it too. Shuya had seen Tadakatsu's mom get uptight about those kinds of things. After all, rock music was banned in the Republic. There were, of course, ways around the ban. Shuya's guitar bore an official permit sticker that read, "Use of this musical instrument in the production of decadent music is strictly prohibited." Decadent music being rock. Now that he thought about it, Shuya realized he had made a completely new set of friends. A quiet laugh came from the seat behind big Yoshio Akamatsu. It belonged to one of those new friends, Shinji Mimura, boys number 19. Around the edge of the seat, Shuya caught sight of Shinji's short hair and the finely crafted earring in his left earlobe. When they became classmates the year before, Shuya had already heard of the third man, the ace guard on the basketball team. Shinji was proud of his exceptional athleticism, on par with the ace shortstop Shuya, though Shinji would certainly jest, "I'm better, baby." During a school field day held soon after class placement, the two discovered they made a great duo and hit it off the right way. But there was more to Shinji than just sports. Though his grades were merely average, aside from mathematics and English, Shinji possessed a staggering breadth of knowledge and a perspective far beyond his years. Ask him most any question, and he'd have the answer right away, even down to typically unobtainable information about foreign countries. And he'd always have advice in a time of need. Despite all that, Shinji didn't have an arrogant bone in his body. Well, he did have his own way of joking, like the time he said, "Everybody knows I'm a genius, haven't you heard?" But there was nothing offensive about it. Basically, Shinji Mimura was a good guy. Seated beside Shinji was Yukata Seto, voice number 12, who had been the athlete's friend since elementary school. Yutaka was the class clown, and one of his quips was probably what had sparked Shinji's laughter. One row behind the pair was Hiroki Sugimura, voice number 11. Hiroki, reading a paperback, had somehow managed to fold his lanky frame into the narrow seat. Taciturn and a student of martial arts, Hiroki had an intimidating presence and kept mostly to himself. But once Shuya had tried talking to him, he found the boy to be nice, if shy, and the two got along surprisingly well. The paperback was probably one of Hiroki's prized anthologies of Chinese poetry. Chinese literature books were fairly easy to find despite being translations of foreign works. But then they would be, as the Republic proclaimed China our sovereign territory. There was a line Shuya read once in an American book he'd salvaged from some corner of a used bookstore, relying on a dictionary to make it through. Friends come in and out of your life. Maybe that was true. Perhaps he would drift apart from Shinji and Hiroki and his other friends like he had with Tadakatsu. Or not. Shuya glanced at Yoshitoki Kuninobu in the adjacent seat, still rustling through his bag. They, at least, had been together this far, and he didn't see anything changing that. Shuya and Yoshitoki had been friends ever since they were still wetting their beds in the pompously named House of Mercy and Love, a Catholic institution for children who had lost, or who were no longer allowed to live with, their parents. They seemed to be destined to be friends, whether Shuya wanted it or not. While we're on the subject, an explanation on religion in the Republic might be in order. The government was a unique brand of National Socialism, with the leader, wielder of supreme power, as its leading symbol. Once, Shinji Mimura had scowled and said, "This is what successful fascism looks like. Is there anything as evil anywhere in the world?" But the leader didn't enforce a state religion. Aside from belief in his political system, which itself didn't clash with any established faith. Citizens were free to worship, as long as their activities remained within certain bounds, though the complete lack of any legal protection meant that only the most devout persisted, and only in meager efforts. Shuya himself had never been particularly religious, but he did feel gratitude towards religion. He recognized that the church had given him a comfortable childhood and had raised him into a decent young man, if he could be called one. Secular, state-run orphanages did exist, but by reputation were lousy facilities, poorly run, notorious as training grounds for future soldiers in the non-aggressive forces. Shuya looked over his shoulder towards the rear of the bus. Sitting in the long bench seat of the last row were bad boys Ryuhei Sasagawa, boys number 10, and Mitsuru Numai, boys number 17. A third was at the right-hand window. Ryuhei Sasagawa had left a couple of seats empty between. Though the seat backs blocked his view of the third boy's face, Shuya recognized the distinctive haircut, slicked back and hanging long, atop a head that remained perfectly still, unperturbed by the dirty jokes and coarse laughter of the other two at his left. The youth may have been sleeping, or perhaps, like Shuya, had been captivated by the city lights. Why that boy, Kazuo Kiriyama, boys number 6, had shown up to something as childish as this school trip was the greatest mystery to Shuya. Kiriyama was the leader, of sorts, of the area delinquents, Ryue and Mitsuru among them. Though by no means big, he couldn't have been taller than Shuya. Kiriyama could easily subdue a high schooler, and even took on local yakuza. He had become a prefecture-wide legend. His father being the president of a leading local enterprise probably helped, but there was more to his stature than that. Shuya had heard rumors that Kiriyama was a bastard child. Uninterested, he never bothered to look into it. Kiriyama had a handsome, intelligent face, and his voice, though not deep, was intimidating. His grades were the best in his class. The class leader for the boys' side, Kyoichi Motobuchi, boys number 20, spent late nights studying just to compete. Even in sports, when forced to participate, Kiriyama was better and more graceful than just about any of his peers. The only boys in Shiroiwa Junior High who could rival him in a serious matchup would be the former ace shortstop Shuya and the basketball team's ace guard Shinji Mimura. In every aspect, Kazuo Kiriyama was the perfect man. But why then did this perfect man end up a leader of hooligans? Shuya couldn't begin to know the answer, though he could perceive in Kiriyama a sense, almost tactile, something out of place. Shuya couldn't put his finger on it. Kiriyama never acted out in school, nor would he bully someone as Ryue Sasagawa, and others sometimes did to Yoshio Akamatsu. But Shuya felt something was lacking, perhaps. Kiriyama frequently skipped school. The thought that he would ever actually study was preposterous. When he did show up for class, he just sat there, silent, his mind seemingly somewhere completely different. Without a powerful and meddlesome government insisting upon a compulsory education, Kiriyama might never have attended school at all. Or he might have come all the time, just because he felt like it. Shuya couldn't guess which. He had thought the boy would certainly pass on the school trip without a second thought, yet here he was. Kiriyama acting upon a whim, then. Shuya was staring off at the lights in the ceiling, thinking about Kiriyama, when a sunny voice called his name and pulled him back to reality. From the seat across the aisle, Noriko Nakagawa, girls number 15, offered something wrapped in cellophane. Small enough to fit in the palm of her hand, the pouch was packed full with little, light brown round objects. Cookies, probably. Light from the ceiling glinted across the surface of the clear, stiff wrapping like the sun over water. A neatly tied bow of gold ribbon held it closed. Noriko Nakagawa was in Yukie Utsumi's group of mainstreamers. Shoulder-length hair framed a round and very girlish face, with striking eyes that were gentle and dark, almost black. She was petite, with a playful streak, the picture of an average girl. If anything about her merited special mention, it was her talent with Japanese. Noriko was the best writer in class. As a result, Shuya and Noriko talked relatively often. During breaks, Shuya would compose song lyrics in the margins of his notebook, and sometimes Noriko would ask to read them. Noriko usually kept with Yuki and the other girls, but showing up a little late for the trip, she had been forced to take the open seat. Shuya reached towards the bag, but stopped, raising his eyebrows in question. Somewhat flustered, Noriko said, my little brother begged me to bake these today. I had these extra, and they're no good stale, so you and Mr. Nobu can have them if you like. Mr. Nobu was Yoshitoki Kuninobu's nickname. Despite his good-humored, goggling eyes, Yoshitoki could be surprisingly wise and mature. Referring to him as you would an adult seemed appropriate. The girls didn't often use the boys' nicknames, Mr. Nobu included, but Noriko did, and freely. She made it feel natural and never offended anyone by it. That was Noriko. She had this boy-in quality. Shuya never had a nickname. Actually, he did have something of a strange one from elementary school, after a brand of cigarettes, but like Shinji's the third man moniker, no one actually ever used that nickname when talking to him. But some time ago, he had noticed that Noriko was the only girl who ever called him by his first name. Listening in, Yoshitoki interjected. Really? You mean it? Nice. If you made them, they must be good. Yoshitoki snatched the bag from Shuya's reach, quickly undid the ribbon, and withdrew a sampled a cookie. Wow, these are amazing. Caught in the middle, Shuya grinned. Could that boy be any more obvious? As soon as Noriko had taken the seat across from Shuya, Yoshitoki began acting all weird, sneaking glances at her and straightening his posture. A month and a half earlier, during spring vacation, Shuya and Yoshitoki were fishing for black bass at the city reservoir when Yoshitoki blurted, Hey, Shuya, I kinda got a crush. Oh, Shuya said. Who is it? Nakagawa. From our class? Yeah. Which one? There are two Nakagawas. You mean Yuka? Whatever. You're the one who's into the fat ones, not me. You jerk. You trying to say Kazumi's fat? She's just a little chubby, that's all. Sorry, Yoshitoki said. Anyway, well, it's Noriko. That's so? Well, she's a nice girl. Don't you think so? Right? Yeah. Yoshitoki was utterly transparent, yet Noriko seemingly remained unaware. Shuya couldn't tell if she was that oblivious or what. Maybe that was just part of what made her Noriko. Shuya took a cookie from the bag in Yoshitoki's hand and held it up to his eyes. Then he looked at Noriko and asked, You said they're no good still? Yeah, Noriko gave two sharp nods. For some reason, her eyes seemed tense. That's right. Guess you must be confident they were any good in the first place then. Shuya had been making a lot of snide remarks lately, perhaps picking it up from Shinji Mimura. The habit annoyed some, but Noriko giggled and said, That's right. Hey, Yoshitoki said, cutting in again. I said they were amazing, didn't I? You heard me, right, Noriko? Noriko smiled. Thanks. You're so sweet, Mr. Nobu. Yoshitoki suddenly stiffened, as if he had poked his fingers into an outlet. Then, without further comment, he stared down at his feet and crunched on another cookie. With another grin, Shuya popped the cookie into his mouth. It was sweet and light. This is good, he said. Noriko, who hadn't taken her eyes off him the entire time, said, Thanks. Shuya thought she sounded different when she was thanking him. Maybe he had just imagined it. But no, her eyes were so serious, watching him eat that cookie. Were they really leftovers from ones made for her brother? Or had she made them because she wanted someone in particular to eat them? No, that was just his imagination, wasn't it? Shuya's mind jumped to Kazumi. She was a grade ahead of him, and until last year, they had been in a music club together. Rock music would never make it into the repertoire of a school in the Republic. But when the music club's advisor, Mrs. Miyata, wasn't around, the band often played rock to kill time. That's really why the students joined up. The only female saxophone player in the ensemble, Kazumi Shintani, was better than any of the boys at rock sax. She was tall, nearly as tall as Shuya's 170 centimeters, and a little chubby. But when she had that alto sax in her hands, and her hair gathered at the sides of her neck, and she got that mature, world-wise expression, she was really cool. The sight made Shuya's heart race. Then she taught him difficult guitar chords. I played a little before I started sax, she said. After that, he practiced day and night, and by the middle of 8th grade, he had become the best in the club. All because he'd wanted Kazumi to hear. One day after school, Shuya and Kazumi found themselves alone in the music room. He sang and played Summertime Blues for her, and she said, That was incredible, Shuya. Really cool. That night, he bought himself his first can of beer to celebrate. It was delicious, but 3 days later, when he told her straight out, I like you, she was as straight with him. Sorry, I have a boyfriend. She graduated and went on to a high school with a music program, the same school as her boyfriend. There's more to the story of Shuya and Yoshitoki fishing at the reservoir that spring day. After telling Shuya about Noriko, Yoshitoki asked, Do you still like that older girl? Shuya answered, Yeah, I like her. Probably will for the rest of my life. Yoshitoki looked perplexed. But hey, she's already got someone. Shuya had said, So what? And with an overhand cast sent his silver lure as far as it could go. Shuya grabbed the cookies from Yoshitoki, who was still looking downward, and said, If you eat them all, Noriko won't get any. Oh, yeah, sorry. Shuya returned the package to Noriko and said, Sorry about that. Oh no, she said. It's all right. You two eat them. Really? The two of us shouldn't get to have all... Just then, Shuya noticed who was sitting next to Noriko. Shogo Kawada, boys number 5, his large frame clad in the school's uniform, leaned against the window glass, arms folded, eyes closed and still. Asleep, maybe. Kawada's hair was cropped so short as to be almost non-existent, and his face, vaguely reminiscent of some carnival food vendor, wore a faint layer of stubble. Stubble, everyone. Didn't he look a little old to be in junior high? Well, actually, that could be explained. Though the same group of students in Class B had been carried over from the 8th grade, Shogo Kawada had transferred in from Kobe, only a month before. And whether due to illness or injury, likely the latter, he didn't seem the type prone to illness. He had missed over half a year of school and had been held back. This made him a year older than most of the class. Though Kawada had never spoken of any of this himself, she had heard it all the same. and what he had heard was frankly not good. According to rumor, Kawada had been nothing but a thug, and he'd received the injuries that had taken him out of school in a fight. Scars all over his body seemed to confirm the speculations. One long slash across his left eyebrow came from what appeared to be a blade, and in the locker room, Shuya had shivered when he saw the scars on the youth's arms and back. As an aside, Kawada's muscular body, reminiscent of a middleweight boxer's, impressed even Shuya. On his left shoulder were two peculiar round marks, one right next to the other, just like gunshot wounds, as impossible as that would be. These rumors came paired with another, shared by whispers. Someday, Kawada and Kiriyama are going to fight. Just after Kawada transferred in, Ryue Sasagawa, reckless and posturing, got in the new student's face. What went down and how it ended were only hearsay, but Ryue came back looking pale and ran crying to Kiriyama, who gave no response, save for a disinterested glance. At least so far, the two would-be rivals had not yet given any impression that anything serious was going to happen. Kiriyama didn't appear to have any interest in Kawada, and the feeling seemed mutual. Thanks to that, Class B remained at peace, happily ever after. I think that's a good place to end it for tonight. I'm going to put the bookmark in. And I hope you have an amazing night tonight. Sleep well.